Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show that cuts through the noise and gets you well-informed fast. Today, we're digging into someone you might call a forgotten giant of Western thought, Xenophanes of Colophon. You know, when you think ancient Greek philosophy, Plato, Aristotle, they usually come first. But way before them, this guy, Xenophanes, was really shaking things up. How we think about gods, nature, even what we can actually know.
He really was a proper radical thinker for his time. And that's what this deep dive is all about, giving him a fresh look, a reassessment. We're making the case that he wasn't just, some poet wandering around making critiques. He was highly original, with a unified, even revolutionary philosophical project.
A unified project. How so?
Yeah, we're looking at it as a threefold revolution. He tackled theology, science, and epistemology, how we know things. It was this big attempt to swap out the old myths and traditions for something new, something built entirely on, well, reason.
Okay, that sounds ambitious. Now, dealing with figures this ancient, sources can be tricky, right?
Definitely. What we have are mostly fragments of his poetry, quoted by later writers, plus, accounts written about him sometimes centuries later. And those later accounts aren't always reliable. They can be biased or just misunderstand him.
So for this deep dive, we're sticking close to his own words.
As much as possible, yes. Those fragments, his actual lines, they have to be the bedrock. That's the best way to cut through the later interpretations and try to get at his real originality.
Got it. So to understand these radical ideas, we need to understand the man, his life. Where did he come from?
He was born around 570, maybe 560 BCE, in Colophon. That's in Ionia, on the coast of modern-day Turkey. And Ionia back then, it was buzzing. The heart of the Ionian Enlightenment. Think philosophy just starting to bubble up.
Like Sales and Anaximander, those guys.
Exactly. In fact, there seems to be a connection to Anaximander. Xenophanes seems to have inherited that spirit of historia.
Historia that's like rational investigation, looking at the world through observation, not just accepting myths.
Precisely. A deep inquiry into how things work. But then things changed dramatically for him.
How so?
Around 546 BCE, the Persians conquered Ionia. Xenophanes was maybe 25. This forced him into exile. A lifelong exile, it seems.
Lifelong? Wow.
Yeah, he actually wrote about his careworn soul being tossed around Greece for 67 years, which, if you do the math, means he lived to be at least 92.
Incredible. And where did he wander?
All over the Greek world, really.
Hmm.
Sicily, southern Italy, Magna Graecia. He's particularly associated with a place called Elea.
Which later became famous for Parmenides and Zeno. The Eleatic's interesting.
Very. And this constant moving, always being an outsider. You argue it wasn't just biographical detail, actually shaped his philosophy.
That's the key point, I think. It gave him this unique perspective. Imagine constantly seeing different customs, different beliefs about the gods. He uses this directly in his famous critique of anthropomorphism.
The one about different peoples imagining gods that look like them.
Exactly. He says, Ethiopians say that their gods are snub-nosed and black. Thracians that theirs are blue-eyed and red-haired. Being an outsider, let him see these cultural biases that someone living their whole life in one city might just take for granted.
It gave him critical distance. He could see that what everyone thought was absolute truth was maybe just a reflection of themselves. It makes his philosophy one of the first, perhaps the first, major Greek philosophy born not from stable tradition, but from displacement, from exile.
And he wasn't writing philosophical essays like we might imagine. He was a poet.
A poet-philosopher, yeah. He used poetry, performance even, to get his ideas across. He wrote in different styles, epic hexameters like Homer, elegies, even satirical poems called siloi.
Siloi satire. So he used humor and critique.
Absolutely. And he performed these himself, probably at symposia, those aristocratic drinking parties. But he wasn't just entertaining. He wanted to reform those very parties, change the conversation.
Reform drinking parties? How?
He gave advice on how to behave, advocated for, piety, drinking in moderation, and discussing virtue, arita, instead of just retelling old myths about fighting gods and giants. For him, poetry was his philosophical method. He'd mimic the style of Homer and Hesiod.
The big names everyone respected.
Right. But he'd use their own forms to subtly undermine their authority. It's called subversive mimesis. Very clever.
So using their own tools against them in a way.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And he even used the sound and rhythm of the poetry itself. There's a fragment about his motionless god where the meter is slow, heavy. It sounds still.
Wow.
And another about behavior at parties, where he deliberately makes a line sound clumsy, apparently to mimic a drunk staggering. The rhythm reinforces the moral point.
That's incredible. So the art wasn't just decoration, it was the argument.
Exactly. He was using performance, satire, meter, everything to re-educate people's thinking.
Okay, so before building his own system, he had to tear down the old one. And he went straight for the foundations, Homer and Hesiod.
He did. It was incredibly audacious. He basically accused them, the most revered poets, of impiety. He said they attributed to the gods all things which are disreputable and worthy of blame when done by men. Things like stealing, adultery, trickery.
So his argument was, gods can't be like that.
Precisely. His core idea was divine perfection. It just wasn't fitting. Prepi was the Greek word for a god to be immoral or flawed. True piety for him meant thinking highly of the gods, which meant rejecting those old, embarrassing stories.
That sounds almost like Plato later on, criticizing the poets in the Republic.
It's a direct precursor. This idea that theology needs an ethical standard, that God must be good, that really starts getting articulated clearly with Xenophanes.
And he didn't just criticize the gods' behavior, but the whole idea of gods looking and acting like humans.
Yes, that was his attack on anthropomorphism. He put it very plainly. Mortals suppose that the gods are born, wear man's clothing, and have human voice and body.
And he uses travelers' observations here, too.
He did. The Ethiopians, black, snub-nosed gods, the Thracians, blue-eyed, red-haired ones. It shows it's culturally specific. But then he hits you with that brilliant thought experiment.
Oh, the one about animals.
Yeah, but if cattle or lions had hands, they would paint their gods and give them bodies and form like their own horses, like horses, cattle like cattle. It completely pulls the rug out from under any claim that our human-like image of God is the absolute truth. It shows it's just projection.
So a critique of the gods' morality, a critique of their human form. Did he criticize anything else?
Oh, yes. He turned that critical eye onto society's values as well. He went after profitless luxuries, and maybe more importantly, he attacked the massive Greek obsession with athletes and athletic glory.
Really? Attacking the ancient Olympics crowd, that's bold.
Extremely bold. He argued that a city's well-being, its good order, doesn't come from some boxer winning at the games. Instead, he claimed his own wisdom, his Sophia, was better than the strength of men or of horses.
So valuing intellect over physical power.
Exactly. It was a radical revaluation of Pareto, of what counts as excellence. He wanted to replace those traditional heroic athletic virtues with intellectual virtue. Wisdom, he thought, was the real key to a good society.
And you're saying these critiques, theological, anthropological, social, they're all connected.
Absolutely. They're not separate complaints. It's one big project of cultural reform, all based on this rational standard of what's truly fitting, what holds real value, versus just tradition or popular opinion.
Okay, so he cleared the ground with these critiques. What did he build in its place? What was his positive philosophy?
Right, because he wasn't just a critic. He offered a new vision. And this is where we see his revolutionary ideas about God, nature, and knowledge really come together. It's a total break from the old mythic way of seeing the world.
Let's start with God. After tearing down the anthropomorphic gods, what did he offer?
He offered a conception of God based on reason. Key fragments tell us, one God, greatest among gods and men, not at all like mortals in body or in thought.
One God. Greatest among gods. That sounds complicated. It's either there's only one, or just one supreme one.
That's the big debate. Was he a monotheist, or maybe a henotheist believing in one supreme God without denying others might exist? Most scholars today lean towards henotheism. But the real innovation isn't the number of gods. It's how he describes this supreme God.
Okay, how does he describe this God?
As totally unlike mortals. All-seeing, all-perceiving, all-hearing, pure mind or thought. He says this God, completely without toil, he shakes all things by the thought of his mind. Effortless power through thought alone.
Wow. And physically?
Unmoving. Always he abides in the same place, not moving at all. Completely unlike the flighty, interventionist gods of myth.
So a God defined by perfection, by reason, not by stories.
Exactly. He's deducing the nature of God from rational criteria what's fitting for a perfect being. It shouldn't move because why would it need to? It shouldn't toil. It shouldn't look like us. This is the birth of natural theology, using reason, not revelation, to understand the divine. It hugely influenced Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics.
Okay, a rational God. How did that connect to his view of the natural world?
It connected perfectly. If God is this transcendent, unmoving mind, not constantly intervening, then you need another way to explain natural phenomena, right? So he developed a natural philosophy, a science based on observation.
Like the earlier Milesians.
He built on them, yeah. But he differed. Instead of one single substance underlying everything, he proposed two fundamental principles: earth and water.
Earth and water. Interesting. Did he do actual, like, scientific observation?
He did, and this is maybe his most startling achievement. He used fossil evidence. He saw fossils of sea creatures' shells, fish imprints found inland, even up on mountainsides.
Fossils. Back then, what did he make of them?
He deduced brilliantly that the world must undergo massive cyclical changes, periods where the land gets submerged, turns to mud, then dries out, and life comes back. It's the first known use of fossils to argue for a deep history of the Earth, for huge geological transformations. Just incredible for the 6th century BCE.
That really is astounding. What about the sky? Meteorology?
He tackled that too, demystifying it all. He argued the sea is the source of all water, including rain, wind, clouds, the rainbow. He said it's just by nature a cloud, colored cloud, not a sign from the gods.
So stripping away the myth from everyday weather.
Completely. He even had this unique idea about the Earth extending infinitely downwards, which meant the sun couldn't circle underneath it each night. So his explanation: a new fiery sun ignites each morning from clouds or vapors. Again, a natural explanation, not a mythical journey.
So his science served his theology in a way, by providing non-mythical explanations.
Exactly. It fills the gap left by a non-intervening God. It demythologizes nature. And it also reinforces his other big idea, that understanding comes from human investigation, from looking and thinking, not waiting for divine messages.
Which brings us to his third revolution, epistemology, the theory of knowledge itself.
Yes, arguably his most profound contribution. He seems to be the first Greek thinker to really grapple with the limits of human knowledge. He lays it out in a crucial fragment, B34.
What does it say?
And of course, the clear and certain truth, to Safes, no man has seen, but opinion, dokos, is allotted to all.
To Safes and dokos, what's the difference?
To Safes is like perfect, certain, infallible knowledge, the kind only God can have. It's beyond mortal reach. Dokos is opinion, belief, conjecture. It's what we humans have. It's our universal condition. We can have true opinions, but we can never be absolutely certain they match that perfect divine truth.
Okay, so if we can only have opinions, does that mean we should just give up? Become skeptics?
No, and this is really important. He doesn't preach despair or inaction. He offers a way forward. Another fragment, B18, says, "Indeed, not from the beginning did gods intimate all things to mortals, but as they search, zoktantes, in time they discover better."
Zoktantes, searching.
Yes. Progress comes through searching, through inquiry. We might only have dokos, opinion, but we can improve our opinions over time. We can make them better approximations of the truth. He's an early voice for fallibilism, the idea that our knowledge is always provisional, always open to improvement.
So we keep searching, trying to get closer to the truth, even if we can't grasp it perfectly.
Precisely. He even says about his own theories, probably his scientific ones, something like, "Let these things be believed as approximations to the truth." There's a humility there, but also a drive to inquire.
And you said this epistemology is the keystone. It holds everything else together.
I think so, yeah. Look at his critiques. Why do people imagine human-like gods? Because their dokos is limited, shaped by their own experience. Why do they overvalue athletes? It's a mistaken dokos about what's truly good for the city. And his positive ideas, his rational theology, his natural science, they're examples of the search, of trying to build better dokos through reason and observation. It all fits.
It's a remarkably coherent system for someone writing in fragments, performing poetry.
It really is. And his influence, it stretched far beyond his own lifetime.
Let's talk about that legacy. You mentioned the Eleatics earlier, Parmenides and Zeno. What was his connection there?
Well, the ancient tradition actually called him the founder of the Eleatic school. Modern scholars are a bit more cautious. Maybe not a direct teacher-student link with Parmenides, but the conceptual link is undeniable. He was definitely a catalyst.
How so? What ideas carried over?
Think about his one God, uncreated, unchanging, unmoving, known through thought. That sounds an awful lot like the ancestor of Parmenides' one being, doesn't it? And that core distinction Xenophanes made between Theseus, divine truth, and dokos, mortal opinion. Parmenides takes that and turns it into his fundamental split between the way of truth and the way of opinion. The foundation is clearly there.
Okay, so a major influence on the Eleatics. What about other contemporaries? The Milesians, the Pythagoreans?
With the Milesians, he was clearly an heir, especially to Anaximander's spirit of inquiry. But he pushed beyond them. He introduced the two principles, earth and water moving past their single substance theories. And crucially, he added that layer of self-aware epistemology, thinking about how we know, which they didn't really do.
And the Pythagoreans, they were big in southern Italy where he traveled.
His relationship with them seems mostly critical, even satirical. There's that famous fragment, B7, where he mocks their idea of metempsychosis, the soul reincarnating.
Oh yeah, what does he say?
He tells a story about Pythagoras supposedly stopping someone from beating a puppy, claiming he recognized the voice of a deceased friend in the dog's yelping.
Chuckles softly. Okay, so he's basically making fun of the idea. That fits with his rejection of unverifiable beliefs.
Exactly. It's sharp, witty, and totally in line with his demand for rationally grounded claims.
So beyond specific schools, what's his broader, lasting impact?
Well, even thinkers who disagreed with him, like Heraclitus, who famously criticized him for having much learning, but not real understanding. Even Heraclitus seems to echo Xenophanes' critical spirit and focus on a unifying principle. But the biggest legacy is probably founding that tradition of natural theology, using reason to talk about God that resonates through Plato, Aristotle, the Stoics, and frankly, much of Western philosophy and theology afterwards.
And the influence on Plato seems particularly strong.
Definitely. We mentioned the critique of the poets. It's huge in Plato's Republic. The whole knowledge versus opinion distinction, episteme versus doxa in Plato, is absolutely central to Plato, building directly on Xenophanes' essays versus Dokos. Even Plato's arguments for valuing wisdom over physical strength echoes Xenophanes' critique of athletic worship.
So wrapping this up, Xenophanes emerges not just as a poet or a critic, but as a really systematic, original thinker.
Profoundly original, I'd say. His life's work wasn't just scattered critiques, it was a unified project, a project to dismantle that old mythic, heroic worldview.
And replace it with one based on reason, observation, and a certain intellectual humility.
Exactly. His rational theology, his empirical science, his pioneering epistemology, they all work together towards that goal.
He really laid some foundational stones for Western thought, didn't he? Rational theology, early empirical science, the beginnings of epistemology.
Absolutely. He was a true founder in many ways.
So a final thought for you, our listener. Xenophanes pushed his culture to question its deepest assumptions about God, the world, truth itself. How might his call to keep searching, to always seek better opinions, resonate today in our world overflowing with information, but maybe lacking in critical inquiry?
And perhaps consider this too. How did his own life, that long journey as an exile, shape those incredibly radical ideas he developed? Something to think about until our next deep dive.